Well, hello there. Thank you for joining me. This podcast is about near-death experiences. I hope the experiences you hear on this podcast are able to awaken something within you, to test the beliefs you already have, to open your eyes a bit, to see the world a little bit differently, to make your life easier, and to give you hope for what happens once the body you are in expires, and what has happened to all those other people that you've lost, and hopefully answer some of those questions you might have. For me, this topic is it's not religion, but it has a lot of common elements. I mean, you look at Christianity, you look at the Muslim faith, and they're mainly based on what happened to two historic figures and their experience of life and what they were able to learn, and are obviously very good teachers and charismatic, and people listened to them and truly believe what they were saying. Whereas now we get people all over the world coming back from the dead, and are able to relay messages that were very similar to these two guys. So in a lot of ways, this topic that I explore has a lot in common with some of the messages that you see from some of the bigger faiths, in particular love. Love is pretty much the key to it all, is what we learn. So let's get into the experience this week. This one's longish, so we'll get straight into it. It's from a lady called Sharon M. And this is Sharon's experience. It was mid-2005, midsummer 2005. I was sitting outside on the back steps of my house, talking on the phone to a dear friend of mine who lived in Oregon. It was late in the day, and my former husband had just gotten home from work. He was an electrician at one of the plants in the areas. He'd walked past me as I was sitting there on the concrete steps, and it had just begun to rain. I heard thunder in the distance, so I asked him, as he walked past me, going into the house, if I would be safe talking on a cordless phone during a storm. He said I should be fine. So my friend and I continued talking as he went into the house to change clothes. About 5 minutes later, I heard a loud crack, just as the lightning bolt came from the angry sky, hitting my right arm. I felt the searing pain as the lightning passed throughout my body, knocking me to the ground and leaving char marks on the concrete steps where my feet were and where my rear end was on the steps. After passing through me, it travelled under the house and blew out the transformer that was directly in front of the house, rendering the entire neighbourhood with no power for 4 hours. I remember being in shock, feeling very strange, feeling very disoriented and very disconnected. I was shaking all over, I was sweating, and I was sick to the stomach. Plus the pain in my arms and my chest was unbearable. The reason the house seemed unfamiliar was because after my spirit had left my body and gone into the house for that short period of time prior to going into the clouds, what I saw was very confusing, because although it was my house, all the furnishings were not mine. They were from a completely different time period. It was as though I had been transported back in time to maybe the 1920s or the 1930s. I could not believe what had just happened. I was on the ground and felt my spirit lift up out of my body. I floated into the house and I was looking around. Everything looked so strange and nothing looked right. Everything had a burnt yellow colour to it, even the air. Then I noticed that the furniture in the house was not my furniture. I immediately looked at the lace of the curtains. They were not my curtains. I was beginning to feel frightened. There was no one in the house. Where did my husband go? Where did my children go? I could not find anyone, and there was no electricity. The transformer was blown, yet I could hear what sounded like an old-time radio program playing. I wasn't floating anymore. I walked through the rooms looking for whatever it was that was making the sound, but I could never find it. They must have only lasted a couple of minutes, but time seemed to stop, and things seemed to be moving in very slow motion. Then I found myself totally enfolded within the most beautiful, fluffy pink and gold clouds. They were so magnificent. I was in an awe of such beauty. I felt such a deep sense of peace and a sense of total and complete love. It was so big, so huge, so complete, and so deep. It felt like every pore of my body was open, and I was soaking all of the peace and love into them. I was just basking into this beautiful, deep love. I felt whole, complete, and totally accepted. I had no idea what was happening. I was moving laterally through these gorgeous clouds. I did not have a sense of moving up or down. I could feel all this huge presence all around me. It was such a loving presence that was pouring love onto me and into me. It was a love like I had no words to explain. It was so beautiful, it brings tears to my eyes, even now. Sorry, there's a bit of air traffic out there today. I've got to keep the windows and doors open because it's the first kind of warmish day in Melbourne of the summer. So yeah, a little bit hot. So apologies for that background noise. I just can't put the fan on or it will probably make the sound even worse. But anyway, fingers crossed that's the last of the airplanes for a while. Back to the experience. Then 2 men appeared and stood, one on either side of me. They were young men, maybe in their 20s or early 30s. They had blonde hair and blue eyes. They wore what looked like cream-coloured linen clothing. There was a brilliant glow around them. They seemed to be illuminated, and their joy seemed to pour from every cell in their bodies. I noticed the linen cloths they wore were very detailed. It was a very tightly woven cloth and very soft to touch. I could see the tiny weave pattern of the linen. Why that seemed important, I do not know, but it stood out very clearly. I first thought these men were angels, but then I realized who they were. These 2 men were my younger brothers who had died as babies. I was only age 1 when my first brother died shortly after birth, and when I was age 2, my mother lost the other one due to a miscarriage. although she was far enough along to know she was having a boy. I knew of these men, but was too young to have remembered anything about them. My parents never spoke of them. We were so happy to see each other. It was like a family reunion. They had beautiful smiles and they looked so much like my dad. I knew he would be so proud of them both. I felt at ease as they led me from the clouds to a beautiful garden that was to the left of this huge, glorious city. As I looked around, I noticed that the colours were so bright and vibrant, and the air was sweet and clear. I could hear birds singing. I heard water running, like there was a stream nearby. There were trees and flowers, and the grass was so cool and soft on my feet. I felt a soft, silken breeze touch my skin. As I stood in this breathtaking place, I felt a huge presence all around me just pouring love out onto me. It felt such joy, and all I could do was stand there in awe at the beauty and the love that was all around me. By this time, I was given the information that I had died and was entering heaven. It was like an infused knowledge. It was given as a simple fact. There was no feeling of fear or shock. It felt like I was floating. It felt good, so I didn't fight it. Then, as people gathered around me for support, I was given all my life review. I was shown my life, and everything I had ever said and done was shown to me. It was like watching a black and white movie on a reel. There was no feeling and no judgment at all. It was right then that I learned that God does not judge us. We judge ourselves. Standing there before Him in all of His glory and perfection, while we watched our lives pass in front of us. For me, all He did was love me throughout my review. Not a word was said, and it was over in the blink of an eye. It was after the life review that I heard a male voice say, "All right, so what you put out into the universe will come back to you." As I stood there in the garden, I noticed once again how beautiful and brilliant the colours of the flowers, the trees and the grass were. The reds were redder, the pinks were pinker, and the yellows were more yellow. The colours were so much more vibrant than any colours I've ever seen. The air was sweetly fragrant. It was so clean and clear. The grass felt cool to the touch, like on a beautiful spring day. There were birds singing in the trees, and I saw a stream where the water glistened like diamonds in the sun as it flowed over the rocks. I heard music, which was much more beautiful than anything I'd ever heard before. It was then that I noticed everything had its own pitch or sound. The trees had a sound. The leaves on the trees had their own sound. The grass had a sound. Even the rocks had their own sound. And the water had yet another sound still. And so on. And when you take all of those individual sounds and put them all together, it sounded like the most magnificent symphony and choir ever created. And what's even more amazing was everything and everyone in heaven was singing the praises of God. It just poured out of every leaf, rock, blade of grass, and every bird. It was the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. I can still hear it, even now, after all these years. It was like a song in the wind. Every now and then I still hear the heavenly music as the breeze blows through the leaves on the trees. It carries me back there and I feel that deep, all-encompassing love again. It heals my soul and my spirit soars. There is no time in heaven, so I have no idea how long it took for each different step of this journey. On one hand, it seemed like everything happened so fast, and on the other hand, it seemed that time stood still. I began feeling as if I was attached to a giant IV bottle of knowledge. I was being fed all this knowledge, and I didn't even have the words to ask the proper questions. I felt such joy and elation. It was one aha moment after another, and it all seemed so simple and logical. I remember at one point saying with a huge smile on my face, "Wow, is that all there is to it? That is so cool. God, you are awesome." We are the ones who make everything so complicated. I saw angels and they spoke to me, showing me a lake. And in the lake, they showed me future events that would take place on Earth, which have, in fact, taken place. I also remember I looked down the front of my body. I could see that I still had a body and it looked the same as it always had. I had on the same clothes as before, and I noticed my long blonde hair falling down below my shoulders. I could see my jean shorts and my feet, but I also noticed that my body was much lighter. It felt kind of floaty. It was not heavy like it is here on Earth. On Earth, we are weighed down with gravity. Everything seems very heavy, but there it was a light body. I also noticed that I was no longer concerned about my body, how it looked, or if I fit in or not. I know I keep saying it, but all I felt was huge love and total acceptance. It was so amazing. There were people everywhere. Everyone looked young and no one was sick. Then Jesus walked up to me. He was tall and so beautiful. His hair was dark and wavy and very long down to his waist. His skin was dark and his eyes were a warm liquid brown. Jesus had a smile that melted my heart. He told me that he loved me, that he had walked beside me in every day of my life. He told me that he had never left my side and never would leave my side, not ever. Jesus told me not to be afraid. I just stared at him. I couldn't speak. He was so beautiful. And to think, he actually died for me. I was speechless as he stood there declaring his love for me. Then I moved to the edge of the garden to what looked like a wooded glen. I could see golden sunbeams pouring through the branches of the tall oak and pine trees. I noticed a log lying next to a stream with little flowers dotting around it here and there. There were pine needles and a few pine cones scattered about. I went over to the log and sat down listening to the water as it danced across the rocks. When I looked up, I saw a man sitting on the other end of the log next to me. The air was cool and comfortable, and I could hear the birds singing their sweet songs. I knew the man was God. He had shoulder-length dark curly hair, a neatly cut beard, and beautiful blue eyes, and a happy smile. He was about 6 feet tall and wore a white robe and sandals. We sat there on the log together for the longest time just talking. He had a wonderful laugh and such sparkly, happy eyes. He became silent for a moment. Then he turned and faced me. He looked into my eyes and in a quiet, gentle voice, he asked me, "What would you do if it were just me and you?" I looked at God and asked him, "What do you mean?" He smiled and was so patient, like a father with a young child. He asked me again, "What would you do if it were just me and you?" I looked down at my hands in my lap and I thought for a minute, and then looked at him again and said, "I don't know, what do you mean?" He was still smiling, and he very patiently explained, "No parents, no children, no husband, no friends, just me and you, no one else." Looking into his beautiful face, I shook my head and kind of started feeling a bit intimidated and unworthy all of a sudden. I said, "No, I would drive you crazy after the first 10 minutes with all my questions and chatter, and then you would not like me very much, if it were just me and you." He just smiled at me. He was so patient and so loving, so gentle in fact that those feelings of inadequacy had begun to disappear. He then got up and motioned for me to follow. We walked a very short distance. Then he showed me the whole universe with no one in it. There were no people, no buildings, no cars, no animals, and no trees. There was nothing but swirling rainbow-colored gases, sparkling diamond stars, and spinning planets. It was breathtakingly beautiful, but it seemed so strange. I never realized how big the universe really was. It seemed like within a second we were back again, sitting on the log by the stream, and he asked me once again, "What would you do if it were just me and you?" I was at a loss for the right words to properly answer his question. He waited. I found myself looking at a very large oak tree that was right in front of me. I saw the details of the trunk and the little life-giving veins in the tender leaves and the roots beneath the ground. What I saw was not just a tree, but the individual parts that made up the whole tree. And I saw how important all these parts were to the life of the tree, and how important the tree was to the environment around the tree. And I could see how all things are connected to each other, and that every part was important in its own way. I studied this for a few minutes, feeling that my noticing was exactly what God had planned, and that this was a very big part of understanding what God was trying to teach me. Then I answered him. Now, I have no idea why I would have answered him in this manner, since I have never read the Quran in my life. I have never seen the book, nor do I know anything about the Islam faith. But I said, "God, your 100th name in the book of the Quran is God everywhere. God is nowhere, and God is in me." He said, "Yes, that is right. That is it." And I looked at the tree again, then smiled back at him and said, "God, you made this tree. You are in this tree. So when I look at this tree, I see you." He looked at me smiling, that beautiful smile, and he said, "Yes, and?" Then I began thinking about my parents, and I said, "God, you made my parents. You are in my parents. So when I see my parents, I see you." Again, he said, yes, and he was trying to get me to think further. So I began thinking that there are people in this world who are cruel to others, and there are those who have hurt me. I don't particularly care for these people, so I said, God, there are some people who I don't really care for because they hurt others, but you made these people. You are in these people. So when I see these people, I see you. He again smiled at me and he said, yes, that's right. Now I have a question for you. When you look in the mirror, what do you see? I looked down again at my hands and I thought for a moment. My normal response would have been something like, I see me, no one special, just me. But then I looked into his beautiful eyes and those feelings melted away because of the deep love I saw there. Then I said, God, you made me, you are in me, so when I look in the mirror, I see you. He said, yes, that is right. He seemed so happy and he was smiling from ear to ear. I could feel his joy and his deep love surrounding me. I was completely immersed in his love as he looked at me. To me, this was so big. I could feel the hugeness of this revelation. I could feel it just spinning in my heart and mind. I can see the beauty of God so easily in others all around me, but it is much more difficult to see God's beauty in myself. I find, even now, I have to remind myself that I am special and that I am beautiful. Each and every one of us is special to God. He made us. He is in us. He doesn't make mistakes and he doesn't make junk. To him, we are all important. We are all beautiful. He sees us with perfect love. We are imperfect beings who he loves perfectly. Perfect love makes our souls shine so beautifully. What I had to learn was that real beauty shines from deep within the soul. External beauty fades with time, but real beauty comes from inside and never fades because it is eternal and internal. I had to learn that my worth as a human being isn't dependent on what others think of me or whether they were happy with me or not. I also needed to learn that happiness doesn't come from an external source. In order to be truly happy, it has to come from inside my own heart. To God, I am me. That's all, just me. In his eyes, I am a perfect being, just me. My worth is in being who God made me to be. I don't have to make everyone happy. What God wanted me to know was that he is always happy with me. What I have to do is to be happy with myself and to find joy in my life. I have to stop worrying about what everyone else thinks. I need to see his beauty in myself. We finished our conversation and then we got up. We started walking through the forest and we were met by two beautifully, ornately gowned women who led me to a calm, serene lake at the end of the wooden area. The two women I knew were angels and began showing me what looked like moving pictures of future events that would take place on Earth. What was shown to me were the events surrounding the 9/11 attacks and other terrorist attacks against our country, as well as our financial institution crumbling, or better said, our money not being worth the paper it was written on. I was shown silver and gold coins being used to purchase things. They said that in time we would be going back to the barter system, as well as we had done long ago in the past. They showed me many natural disasters like earthquakes, volcanoes, tornadoes and storms, and 6 huge waves of water covering the land. I saw the one in Japan, in Indonesia, and also one in Chile. I saw a woman in Canada who had a little boy in her car, and her car went off the road because of floodwaters, and her car was immersed under the water, and they were drowning. God sent angels in the form of people to pull them out, but the boy had already passed away. They told me he would survive, however, and he did. He went on to promote a spiritual video series. They showed me the government and how they were destroying the peace in our world and how corrupt they are. They showed me that the darkness that surrounds them. They showed me different levels of government being overthrown and huge riots in the street. They showed me one particular riot where a man was throwing something through a storefront window, and there was a building nearby that was on fire. I also heard the sound of gunshots. They showed me the pockets of light that were still left in small sections called safe havens. These havens were these areas are in the mountainous regions. They showed me how to see dark clouds and land around the land in the lands to know where the safe havens are located. One last thing they showed me was a silver ribbon splitting the United States apart. I was given knowledge that this ribbon was a river. I'm assuming it was the Mississippi River, but they gave me no explanation as to the meaning of this ribbon, other than the ribbon was getting larger. The truth is, to this day, when these things happen, I am still shocked and surprised as anyone that they actually happen the way that the angel showed me. It's only after the fact that I realize, oh my God, that's what they showed me. It seems so incredible to me. I don't know why they showed me those things. What was I supposed to do with the information? They didn't say, so I just wait to see what would happen next. When things happen, as they said it would, I'm still amazed by it. I'm sorry, I can't predict the future. I really don't want to know. However, sometimes I will get flashes of that IV bottle of knowledge, and I might know something a day, a week, or maybe a month before it happens. I might get a dream about it or see it in a vision before it occurs. Then I pray. Everything that the angels have showed me in my near-death experience about future events so far has come to pass. When my experience ended, I was lying on the ground in my backyard, right next to the steps where the lightning had hit me. I could see the phone had been knocked out of my hand, lying, and was on the opposite side of the patio. It was all burnt and black. I also saw the black char marks on the stairs where my feet were, and where my rear end was on the stairs. After returning from my near-death experience, I lived in a complete state of bliss or oneness with God for about the first 6 months. I have a much stronger faith now than before. I am not religious, but have a much deeper relationship with God. I have visions, and I see, smell, and hear spirits. Many relationships have changed, being divorced and remarried. Right after my near-death experience, I had a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. At first, I was unable to go into stores, churches, or crowded places because I could feel the energy waves of other people. The bright lights, loud music, or dark colors would make me ill. I seemed to be attracting lightning. I have been hit a total of 4 times, twice by ball lightning and twice by lightning bolts. I was hit by lightning at ages 40, 43, 44, and 46. The first time was by ball lightning that came through the side window, in the den through the cracks in the window. It rolled across the floor and zapped my hands while I was on the computer. The second time was my near-death experience with a lightning bolt. The cardiologist said I had a minimal heart damage as a result of the strike and was lucky to be alive. He said I have a right bundle branch block as a result of the lightning strike. The third time I got hit was by another ball of lightning that came through the front window in the living room as I was watching TV. It rolled across the couch, hitting me in the back of my head. And the fourth time was another bolt that hit the ground, travelled under the house, through the curling cord, and fused the curling iron to my hand. I was in a marriage that was extremely abusive. After my near-death experience, I got a divorce and the lightning strike stopped. I think God was trying to wake me up to important truths. I'm not really sure though. I could be wrong. Right after my near-death experience, I had so much energy that I went 11 days with no sleep. I read everything I could get my hands on. I loved everything and everyone. I still do, but I'm a little more careful now. It has been 10 years, so I have adjusted. Not long ago, I spoke to a professor of Islamic mysticism. He was interested in my near-death experience, the 100th name of God, and how I knew God's name. Since I didn't know a thing about the Quran, he explained to me that in the book of Quran there are only 99 names of God written down, but the 100th name of God is known only by the holiest of the holies. It is never spoken or written down. So he asked me how I came to know it. It had to be God that put my knowledge into my mind. And as I spoke it, God said that it was correct. Reflecting about my conversation with God, I feel he was teaching me a huge lesson. He was creating everything, and he is in everything. No matter what God wanted me to know, at that moment, he loved me. He had made me. He was in me. And when I looked in the mirror, I saw him. I can see the beauty of God so easily in others all around me now, but it is much more difficult to see God's beauty in myself. I find even now that I have to remind myself that I am special and I am beautiful. Each and every one of us is special to God. He made us. He is in us. He doesn't make mistakes and he doesn't make junk. But yeah, look, I'll leave it there because this last paragraph looks like it is a repetition of what she spoke during the actual experience. So that's the end of Sharon's experience. To me, this sounds very familiar, a lot of it. I've been through the experiences I've already read out and I can't find this lady's name so I don't think I've read this one out before. So it probably just means I have listened to her on an interview or watched a YouTube video with her talking about her experience, because there's a lot of points in there that I feel like I have heard before, particularly the premonitions or the predictions as to what she thinks is going to happen, plus the start where she is struck by lightning and then is taken to, she leaves her body and then goes into her house and feels like she has walked back 100 odd years and the house looks completely different in terms of the furnishings and technology. It sounds very familiar to me. So if I have somehow read this one before, I'm sorry. I don't mean to repeat the stories again and again, but I guess it might happen every once in a while. But I do not think it's been me that's read this experience. I've just heard it somewhere else. So that experience it's really well written. It flows off the tongue. It kept me engaged as to what would actually happen. Even if I had heard the experience before somewhere else, it was nice to read, and hopefully it was enjoyable to listen to as well. So if that's all you like to hear on this podcast, the story from the person's point of view, you can leave it there, because now I'm just going to go through it again and give a bit of commentary. So this experience happened back in 2005. She's talking on the phone. Now, I didn't know this was a thing when you are on the phone and you are potentially exposed to thunder and lightning, but this Sharon seems to have a bit of an insight as to this being dangerous. So she decides to ask her electrician husband if it's going to be dangerous for her to talk on the phone while there is an electrical storm out there, and he's an electrician and he should probably know this, but he says no, it's going to be fine. So she continues talking away, but 5 minutes later she hears this huge crack and sees this bolt come out of the sky, and it actually directly hits her right arm. And then the bolt continues passing through her. Then she sees it go under the house and blows the transformer out in her fuse box. And then this consequently knocks the entire power out of the whole neighborhood. So once she's been hit, she feels terrible, strange, disorientated, in shock, disconnected is words she uses. And she also feels some physical discomfort in terms of nausea and perspiring. And then she says she doesn't actually say her soul or spirit or consciousness leaves her body, but she just gets this feeling that everything seems a little bit unfamiliar. So she goes and explores her house, and like I just said, it looks like it is from a completely different time period, from like the 1920s or 30s. So you can imagine what that would be like. You walk into a house today and there's computers, mobile phones, TVs, kitchen appliances, and back then it was probably not even electricity, so it would look very different from that point of view, as well as the furnishings and the decorations would be very unfamiliar for someone who is used to what we are exposed to in this time period. And when I think like that, I think, well, it's amazing. That's just 100 years ago that all this stuff has been invented and developed and become normal, and just makes you think, like, what will this planet look like in another 100 years if we've come that far since the 1920s? So she floats around the house. She's looking around. Everything looks strange. She says, like, this burnt yellow color to it. She notices the furniture isn't hers, the curtains look different, and this kind of makes her feel a little bit scared. But she senses there's no one in the house. She's wondering where her children are, where her husband is, like, why is everything looking so different? As you would, like, because it seems at this point in the experience she hasn't really joined the dots and figured that she's no longer in a normal physical body, and she has kind of walked into this other dimension where things are the same, but they're different. And if you didn't really have that understanding of this disconnection you have with your body, as is often the case with these near-death experiences, people don't join the dots. They don't realize their physical self is dead. And if you are in that state of mind and you are walking around this property that you know is your house but looks totally different inside, you would feel a little bit scared, wouldn't you? She says that she feels like everything has slowed down, time seems to have stopped, and everything is kind of moving in slow motion. And as she starts to feel and experience this timelessness type sensation, it's almost like she switches to another dimension again. She leaves this physical realm, she leaves the earth, and she begins to be engulfed by these pink, fluffy, and gold clouds. And I'll go through this paragraph a little bit more detail again, because for me, this is a part of the experience I like to connect to, because it's her way of describing what this connection to the source, or reintroduction to the source, or reintroduction to this heaven-like dimension is like. So she says she feels awe of the beauty of the surrounding she's experiencing. She says she feels a deep sense of peace and a total sense of love. She feels so complete, and she feels this love so deeply. It's like every pore of her body was open and seeking all the peace and love in her environment and just drawing it into her own being. It's like she's bathing or basking in this beautiful deep love. She feels whole, she feels complete, and just totally accepted. But at the same time, she has no idea what is going on. It's like this totally bizarre chain of events. One minute she's on the phone, next she's in her house, but it's not her house. And now she's in this blissful dimension and feeling love like she never has before. And the confusion is also around the way she is experiencing this dimension. There's no up or down or left or right, but she can sense this huge presence all around her, and it's a loving presence that's just pouring the love onto her, and it's like love she has never experienced before. There's no words to explain it other than to say it was just immensely beautiful, and brings a tear to her eye even now when she reflects on it. So yeah, that is what I like to hear. Obviously, that is what we all like to hear. That is what we all like to imagine. This is what is awaiting us when we cross over this blissful dimension. And so many people experience it. So there's no reason to think that you and I won't go to a similar place. So as she's experiencing this love-like dimension, there's two people that suddenly appear to her. They're young guys in their 20s or early 30s, so in their prime, as they often seem to appear when a person is crossed to this other dimension, crosses over. They don't see their grandparents in their 80s. They tend to come back when they are in their prime, which is usually sort of 20s, early 30s, before we go grey and get wrinkles and, all that beautiful stuff that we go through as we get older. So she can't quite figure out who these two guys are, as you wouldn't. There's so much stuff happening to this lady, like like I just went through the house, the heaven-like state, and now there's these two good-looking guys in her presence. So she's a little bit bewildered and doesn't really know what's going on. She notices in explicit detail what exactly they're wearing, which you come across a fair bit in these experiences. When they cross over, they seem to really pay a lot of detail to what people look like and what they're wearing, and they seem to retain this part of the experience and remember it well. So she goes into a fair bit of detail there as to what these guys were actually wearing, which I won't go into. But then the penny drops. She realizes that these two guys are her younger brothers. They died when she was only a toddler, or less than a toddler. I don't know the correct terminology. Baby, I guess, when you're one. So these younger brothers were miscarried by her mother, and yet here they are, grown men and alive again in her presence. And she says seeing these guys was like a family reunion. Even though she didn't know them in this physical realm, there was a strong connection there. She says that they looked exactly like her dad, and her dad would be proud of them. And she just feels incredibly at ease with these two brothers that she never experienced life with in the earth realm. So she looks around and jumps to how she's experiencing the dimension again. She says the colours were bright and vibrant, the air was sweet and clear, and she then goes into a fair bit of detail as to what she can hear. She hears the birds singing, she hears the water running, and she then says that feels like she's wearing no feet, and the grass feels cool and soft on her toes. And there's a soft, warm breeze flowing and touching her skin, and she's just in breathtakingly gobsmacked awe at this place, and still feels this immense love pouring into me while she's experiencing an environment which is very pleasing to her personally. And she just goes on to say she's feeling such joy, and all she can do is just stand back there in awe and wonder of the beauty and love that was all around her. I just have to stop and sigh there. It's a pleasure to read someone having such an amazing experience of the afterlife. I'd like to actually know what her beliefs or if she was an atheist, or what her thoughts were on God, religion, afterlife before this actual experience happened. I might have to try and track her down and have a chat with her one day. So she moves on within this realm. I don't know if moves on is the right word. I don't know if the next thing she experiences is even the right way to phrase it, because often these events in this dimension aren't chronological. They're just all kind of happening at once, and that makes it even more difficult for these people who have these experiences to actually relay what it's like, because obviously the way we structure our words and stories here on earth, it needs sort of this happened and that happened and the next thing happened, but often all these things that this lady is experiencing is occurring at the same time, which is very difficult for us to get our head around, but usually this is how it is. So next, she says, and again I use the word inverted commas around next, she says that she has this information downloaded to her. She says it's like this infused knowledge. It was it's like uh, it's just ingrained into her almost, I guess. But then she jumps to describing what her life review was like. She says, I was shown my whole life, everything I'd ever said and done. It was like watching, and in her case, she gets a bit of an old school way of seeing her life review. It's in black and white rather than in high definition color. So I don't know why that is. It's a little bit unusual. And it's like on one of those movie reels. So she's sitting there watching her life, watching all the so-called good things and bad things happen, and she sort of feels God's presence with her. And again, and this is important, I think, especially for those people who have a strong fear of displeasing God or doing the wrong thing. Because she says in her experience that God does not judge us. In this life review, we judge ourselves. So she says there is God standing right next to her as they're watching her life pass before them from the day she's born up until this event with the lightning. And God's just sitting there, and she says she calls God a he. So in this commentary, I will use he, but I am a bit reluctant to give God a gender because I personally think God is genderless, and if anything, would probably be female rather than male. But that's just my point of view. So she says that God, that he was with her all throughout this life review and did not say a word. But then she hears, and I guess this we hear a fair bit as well, what you put out into the universe will come back to you. So if you're more of a loving person, more of a caring person, more of a selfless person, I guess that means through the law of attraction, this is what you are drawing to your own experience as well. You hear often that what you want in your life, you should give it out, and then it comes back to you. And this experience is reaffirming that information, that wisdom is correct, that the law of attraction does actually work. She goes into a little bit more detail of how intensely beautiful, how much she's loving this environment. She goes into it again. The air was so fragrant, it was clean, it was clear, the grass cool to touch, the birds were singing, la-di-da-di-da. It's just, wow, it's a beautiful, sounds like a really, really spectacular place to be. Not everyone gets an awesome landscape / environment to experience, but in her case, she seems to get it in spades. And she says she sees other beings, and they're all just elated to be part of creation, and they're singing praises to God. It comes out of every leaf, every rock, every blade of grass, and every bird, and it's just the most beautiful sound she hears and can still hear it even now. She might hear something in this physical realm and it triggers this intense experience she had in this other dimension, and she gets to go back to that place and feel that all-encompassing love for a brief moment. She says there's no time in heaven. So each step of what she's describing here is impossible to quantify in terms of how long she was actually there in each place. And sometimes it seemed like everything she was living in this other realm was going really quickly and happening so fast, but at the same time, there was no time at all. So it was like it was an eternity each moment. She begins feeling, and then she gets this experience of being as she puts it, connected to a giant IV bottle of knowledge. She doesn't really say she asks any questions. She just says that she's being fed this knowledge, and with this knowledge comes one aha moment after another. And as you again so often hear these experiences, when people are explained, given the information as to why this universe is here, why you and I are here right now as individuals, why the earth is a challenging environment to navigate. And when they are given the answers to, what is the purpose of life, and all these deep, profound questions, they often say the answers are so simple, so logical, and easy to understand. It's like, wow, is that all there is to it? That's so cool. God, you're awesome, she says. So why this is, if it's so simple and so logical, why can't we as humans figure it out? Like, why, if it's so easy to understand, shouldn't we as humans at the point of intelligence and evolution we're at, shouldn't we be able to work out these questions as to why the universe is here, and what God is? Like, if it's so simple and logical, surely we can figure it out now. But yeah, is it because she's in this soul-like state and she's connected to this, to the source, and to knowledge, to all knowledge that there is in the universe, that then it's easier to understand then? Like, is that the leap you have to, the point you have to be in to actually understand what God is and what this universe is? Because from our humans' perspective, it can be very confusing to know what God is and why this universe is here, and maybe that's something you just need to understand from the soul's point of view. So she says then, after she gets this knowledge, she looks down and sees that she still has a body. She has on the same clothes and the same hair. So this is a little bit strange, and she notices that her body felt much lighter. So she seems to be in this realm. There seems to be multiple realms in this next dimension, and obviously there's probably an infinite number of ways you can experience it, and some will have a body, some will have no body. Some will feel like they're just a speck of energy. Others will feel like they're the whole of everything. They're just at one with the whole universe. And in Sharon's case, she feels very singular, individualized still, and to the point that she actually still has her same earth body, her same earth clothes on, but just feels a little bit different. So she's not heavy, like she's not pushed down by the gravity and the effort it takes to move as a human. She just feels, as she says, kind of floaty. And the next part of the experience is her connection to Jesus. But I will repeat, as she's introducing this part of her time in this other dimension, she goes to the trouble of writing throughout this whole experience. And I'm sorry for writing this again, but all I was feeling as this was all happening was pure love and total acceptance. So this part of the experience, she's in this realm. There's lots of people everywhere. She doesn't exactly go into detail as to what that was like, but again says everyone looks well, healthy, not sick. And then up trots Jesus, and she describes what Jesus looks like. His hair was long and dark and wavy, down to his waist. Skin was clear, olive-like skin. His eyes were warm, liquid brown, and has a smile to melt her heart. She says Jesus said, "Look, don't be afraid." She just stares at him, and he was so beautiful, she just becomes lost for words. And then she says, "And to think Jesus actually died for me." I was speechless. So obviously this Sharon lady, she's a bit of a Jesus fan, and nothing wrong with that. I've never been fully immersed in Christian theology, but I've always kind of struggled with this part as to what that actually means. Like, Jesus died for me. I don't get that. It's I don't know. Like, it's something to do with dying for our sins, or I don't know. I've never really been able to get my head around it. But for those of you who can, and those of you who understand it, write into me. My email is podafterlife@gmail.com, and explain it, and I'm more than happy to keep an open mind as to what this actually means. And it might be one of those things that is just unique to the individual, and some will feel a profound connection to this message and this being called Jesus that um, supposedly died for us. And yeah, in my research, and it hasn't been too heavily focused on the Bible or Christianity of spirituality, I'm when I look into it, when I do hear of what Jesus is, he's just another messenger from God, another, I guess, one of these people who walk the earth and have this intense connection to the source, and are able to connect to that wisdom and translate what they understand to us as on this realm. And yeah, so yeah, I just don't really get the part how he dies for us. That's all, because I think at the end of the day, what was in Jesus is in you and I right now, and we're all just a part of this source of what we call God. And for whatever reason, Jesus was able to seemingly tap into that quite effectively. So she continues on, and again we are treated to her next experience, and this time she just says she doesn't really talk to Jesus. I guess that's because she says she was speechless, which I guess is quite a likely outcome if you are face to face with someone you admire and respect and have learned a lot about in your earth life. And when you're face to face with that person, I guess it might cause you a little bit of anxiety or loss of words. But yeah, next she's walking through this. She says it's like a wooded glen. I don't really know what a glen is, but I'm picturing forest, bit of an old growth sort of forest sort of thing. And she comes across this man sitting on a log. And this man, she says, she knows is God. And again, he seems like she describes him as incredibly handsome, about 6 foot tall. Tall was wears a white robe, and they just sit there and have a long chat. So I'll stop there and say God is obviously everything, and is just taking on a human form here to appear as someone who is approachable and in a form that is going to be easy for Sharon to connect to. So they sit together and have a long chat, and she says, look, he has a great laugh, he has these beautiful eyes. And then I quite like this bit of the experience. I like it how this next passage is described. So she starts talking to God, and God says, what would you do if it were just me and you? And she's like, okay, God, what do you mean by that? I don't understand what you're telling me or asking me here. Again, God says, what would you do if it were just me and you? So if there was no parents, no children, no husband, no friends, just me and you. And then she gets all self-conscious and replies, look, if it were just the two of us, you would get sick of me pretty quickly. I would ask too many questions and just wouldn't stop talking. So after, and I don't know, what, I guess I get it at the end of this story, so I'll just keep going through what actually happens. And then God shows her the entire universe with no one in it at all. No people, no buildings, no animals, no plants, no trees, but it's this huge, big universe, and it is absolutely spectacular. And could you imagine this? Like sitting next to this person you identify as God and suddenly being shown the whole universe. And they're able to see it in such detail that they can actually tell there's no living entities, no physical living entities whatsoever in this whole universe. And when I read this, I kind of thought, is this what the universe was like to begin with? And then I thought, obviously at some point it must have been, because life has evolved. If you go on what we as humans know about planet Earth and how life has developed here, I guess at some point at the very beginning there must have been just planets. And then I thought, yeah, well, wow, that's an interesting concept. So why has God put physical life on these planets? Like, why are you and me here? But I don't think this is the point of this conversation. I wish it was. I wish this is the direction and explanation we got from this encounter she has with God. But this is not the point of this story. So I will continue. So after seeing this bare universe, God asked Sharon again, what would you do if it were just me and you? And Sharon, look, she's lost for words. She doesn't really get what God or he is asking here. Then she notices the tree in front of her, and she sees the tree from a new perspective. There's immense detail. She sees the little life-giving veins in each leaf, and how important this whole tree is to the whole environment around her. And then the penny kind of drops. She sort of puts two and two together. I think what she's saying here is that all of us, you and me, are very important to the whole. We're all part of the whole. Our environment needs us as much as we need it to survive in this place. But then this experience with God takes a bit of an unexpected turn, because the next thing she says is, she says to God's question, what would you do if it was just me and you? Her answer is to God, and she prefaces this by saying she's never read the Quran in her life, nor knows anything about being a Muslim. She says, this is quote, God, your 100th name in the book of Quran is God is everywhere, God is nowhere, and God is in me. And God says, yeah, that's right. And then she says, okay, God, you made this tree. You are in this tree. So when I see this tree, I see you, God. And then God smiles and says, yes. And then Sharon continues, so that means, God, you made my parents. You are in my parents. So when I see my parents, I also see you, God. And God's response again is yes. And then Sharon begins to think of some of the people she's interacted with on this planet, and probably thinks of a few things that few times she's been in a negative state herself. So she says, God, there are some people I really don't care for because they hurt others. But you made these people also. You are also in these people. So when I see these people I perceive as bad or evil, you are also in them. And God again smiles and says, yep, that's right. So my question for you is, Sharon, says God, when you look in the mirror, what do you see? She says, I see me. No one special, just me. And then God said, and she says, God, you made me. You are in me. And your deep love is all around me. And God says, yep, that's right. So I think that is trying to tell us that every time we see ourselves, whenever we are hard on ourselves, whenever we are negative towards our own appearance or our personality or negative in any way, I think what this experience is trying to say is that we should try to remember that we are all a fragmentation of God, and God is within us, that God made us the way we are. God loves us regardless of the mistakes we make or the path we go on in this life. That we are imperfect beings, but it doesn't matter because God loves us perfectly. And perfect love makes our soul shine. So when we try to see that part of us, that divine part of us, rather than the physical part, which a lot of us can get distracted by, that is a ticket to remembering what you truly are and where you truly came from, and this physical being you are inhabiting at the moment is just a temporary experience that will eventually expire. It will get old, it will die. It will die in the end. But that part of you that is eternal is a part of what God made, and it is perfect, and it will never die. It is indestructible. Then she goes into a bit of, she gets shown by these angels what is coming to our earth, and I've got to be honest, it is a little bit alarming. She says she's showing the events surrounding the 9/11 attacks, how they all went down. She says she sees that money becomes worthless, which probably means a collapse in our financial institutions. She says that we go back to this barter type system where we exchange gold and silver for goods. And she also sees multiple natural disasters like volcanoes, earthquakes, and actually says that a couple of the events she was shown do unfold, one in Japan and one in Indonesia. other part of this premonition or vision she's given by these angels is she sees the United States kind of get ripped in part. So becomes the divided states almost. She says she sees this silver ribbon which um, separates the two halves of the country, and she thinks it was the Mississippi River, but yeah, it's a little bit alarming to those of you in the United States. But from my point of view, when you do hear these premonitions or predictions about future events, I can get alarmed by them, but part of me kind of thinks we always have a way of changing what is going to occur on this planet because we are the ones here at the moment. It's not these spiritual beings that are in the place that we are. We are here ourselves, so we can always change the direction that this of this planet. It's not set in stone. I think um, uh, we have the ability to change the course of history, and I just think nothing on in the physical realm is set in stone. Like, we have our free will. Why would God make a planet where everything was predetermined as to what was going to happen? I it doesn't make much sense to me if that was the case. Like, shouldn't we all be here to make mistakes and learn from them and push the earth in the direction we want it to go rather than some divine being planning it all out before it even started? But as I say that out loud, I think, well, maybe there is like a bit of predestined inevitability about this planet. Like, when you look at this planet and all the natural resources, for example, that are here, it's almost as though the planet was made for humans to get to the point of evolution that they're at now, and develop those resources into things like cars and planes and spaceships, and be able to explore the planet and universe, and just things like the plants on this planet, and all the different food. It's like this whole place was made for humans to get to the point to they're at today. So part of me thinks that there is no set path for humanity, but part of me thinks potentially there is. So and who knows what that answer is. I guess to try and answer that, I can just reflect on my own experience, which has been a transition from a total disregard, disbelief of anything spiritual to one where there is a strong connection there. And for me, it was unexpected, unpredictable, and totally out of the blue. Consciousness or light or love or God or source, whatever you want to call it, something divine came into my life and has changed my direction. So that means that in a way God can, or spiritual loving beings can influence the direction of an individual's path, and I'm just one person, so this must be happening to millions and millions of people all around the world. So when you look at it like that, I guess God can influence the way humanity evolves. But it's still my decision as to what path my life takes, I just feel personally a very strong connection to the divine now, and that's totally changed my life path. And by God changing my life path, I guess I am directly affecting others' paths as well in a more loving way, as opposed to my old selfish, negative way of life. And when you look at it like that, does that mean that this was predestined to always happen to me, or was it that God saw I was in darkness, so He gave me light? It yeah, it blows my mind, and I'm unable to articulate exactly what I'm trying to convey here. But I don't know. It's possible that the whole Earth has a plan from start to finish. But at the same time, it's possible that we're all here just to experience our own time as a human and make the mistakes we're going to make and hopefully learn from them. But sometimes we're going to go down that darker path, and sometimes we're going to stay on that darker path, sometimes for our whole life. But is that part of the plan? Like, why would God make a place where people can suffer so intensely? And it's a pretty crappy plan if that's what it is from a human perspective. But I was in that place, and I still touch and go into that darkness every now and then, but it is not as dominating as it once was, and I owe that to the light. So does that mean, so if my life can be changed by the light, can the whole trajectory of humanity be changed by the light? I think you hear a lot of these spiritual teachers tell us that consciousness or the light is becoming more prevalent in the human species on a regular basis. It is growing and becoming more prominent. So going back to my original point of discussion when I started talking about all this, does Earth have a predetermined destination or trajectory? Does consciousness have a way of manipulating, for lack of a better word, the path that this planet takes? Does it take us as individuals to welcome the light into our lives, to ask for guidance and a clear instructions for a path that is best suited for us as individuals and the planet as a whole? Do we even want that to happen as a race? Are we happy as on the direction that we're headed? We're all individuals, and as answers to those questions are going to be varied. Even my answers would be varied depending on what kind of mood I'm in. So yeah, it's a complicated question. What is the destiny of planet Earth and humanity? But yeah, I think I'll leave it there before I confuse you all even more. But thank you for listening. Hopefully you get a little bit out of this podcast, and well done for making it through to the end. It's been a pretty long one, so yeah, as per usual, I give you my love. I want you to try and embrace the love if you can. Let it into your life. Ask for guidance. Ask for it to be a big part of who you are on a daily basis, or just even if it's just for the next situation you face. It's better than nothing. So yeah, have a good week, and I will touch base again next week. Goodbye.